This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Jill Newbronner, and here are tonight's top stories. The US-Israel war on Iran triggering a free fall in Asian markets. South Korea bearing the brunt with a record-breaking crash that wiped out $500 billion in value. At the heart of the crisis, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran claims complete control, sealing off one of the world's most crucial energy shipping routes, while Donald Trump says the US Navy is ready to escort oil tankers through the waterway. China's top policymakers set to unveil new economic targets at the two sessions, as investors look for signs that Beijing is serious about tackling key issues, including sluggish consumption and a rapidly shrinking population. A Japanese court upholds an order to dissolve the Unification Church after its alleged malpractices were brought to light following the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Also tonight, thousands of nearly naked men brave Japan's winter chill in a raucous ancient ritual to cast off bad luck. And intelligent robots and Li-Fi, some of the latest innovations fighting for attention at a global tech summit in Barcelona. But first, panic gripping Asian markets in the wake of the war in Iran. Is there any relief in sight, Roland?
Yes, Joe, it's hard to say, but I can tell you that Asian markets are highly sensitive to oil prices, and fears are growing that prolonged supply disruptions in the Middle East could push crude higher and deepen the turmoil. Asian markets are under heavy selling pressure on the escalating conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran. The biggest fall came from South Korea, where the Kospi dropped as much as 12%. That's its biggest one-day drop in its 46-year history, and wiping off $500 billion in value just this week alone. Japan's Nikkei, as well as the Taiwan-weighted index, also fell. Analysts say Asian markets reacting badly because it's become an inflation story first and equity story second. Now, for Asia, imported energy is a structural dependency, so higher crude feeds straight into costs, inflation expectations, and fewer rate cut hopes. South Korea isn't just an importer, it's the world's fourth largest oil importer, and about 70% of its oil imports come from the Middle East. So when the market prices a prolonged disruption risk, Korea's macro hit looks bigger and faster than its peers. Add to that, the South Korean equities had already become a crowded trade. Now, the Kospi is up 34% this year. Investors sitting on large gains from a world-beating AI-driven rally now cashing in. High-performing AI semiconductor names led the profit-taking. So Korean markets fell because it had the most to de-risk. Fears the Iran war could cripple Asia's fourth largest economy sent the won to a 17-year low. Now, once currency stress shows up, foreign investors often reduce exposure faster. And when the drop accelerated, well, Korea's exchange halted trading at one point. Now, that's a classic liquidity vacuum. More people selling than buying, so even small orders push prices down faster. The sentiment remained risk-off on the mainland as well, both the benchmarks ending the day nursing losses. Hong Kong's benchmark Hang Seng Index shedding 2%, with the selling led by oil, maritime transport, and port stocks. Now, for more market analysis, we're joined by Uday Vikram, who is Co-Chief Investment Officer at Clay Group. Uday, good to have you on the show. First off, let me ask you this. The sell-off is pronounced. What's the market telling you right now? Is this your base case hinging on contained turbulence or an oil shock?
Firstly, good evening. I think the markets are currently struggling to price, the conflict in the Middle East. What you have essentially is, you have to figure out how long would this conflict last, and would it impact any oil flows into Asia or rest of the world, right? And so history has shown us that 9 out of 10 times, it sort of is forgotten, it resolves itself very fast. But the market right now is figuring out, is that one time going to happen now, i.e., is oil going to get disrupted? Is this going to last a bit longer? And we are all struggling to find that answer currently.
So how low does it go? Do you see more downside for equities? And what would you be watching to confirm a capitulation?
I think currently there are two sort of things which the market needs to figure out. Number one is, will we see oil flows disrupted? And we see the Strait of Hormuz currently is not operating. There are no ships currently sort of crossing Strait of Hormuz. So eventually it will start impacting supplies. I think the longer that lasts, I think the bigger the impact on the market. The worst case scenario for the markets would be if Iran retaliates in a way that oil infrastructure in the region is impacted in a big way. This is refineries or pipelines, etc. And if that happens, I think there could be a lot of downside in the markets. Asia is particularly vulnerable simply because it imports most of its oil from the Middle East. And like you just said, that Asian equities were doing really well. So they have a lot more to lose as we speak.
Uday, against a scenario of a short-lived war and a drawn-out war, who is most vulnerable right now in Asia?
If it's a long-drawn disruption to oil, I think countries like India, Korea, Taiwan, maybe even Japan have a bit of an impact simply because they import most of their energy and they are more sensitive to their current account and trade surpluses. So I think those are the regions which I think would get hit the most. India is right up there in terms of the biggest impact, and followed by Korea, I suppose.
So what are your top 2 or 3 practical portfolio pivots in a shocking environment such as this?
Look, firstly, I think it's a very unsettling environment for people in the Middle East, but also for global investors, simply because you have to figure out how long would this last. In that environment, you have to think about things which could do well, primarily the US dollar, because it's the US is energy independent. So US dollar would do really well, gold would do really well. And I think defensive equities, whether they're in the, which are not that reliant on oil, would sort of do well. So that's primarily high quality companies in the US. I think investors need to think about portfolio positioning in that context, where you have to hedge your worst case scenario, but be cognizant of the fact that 9 out of 10 times, these things sort of resolve fairly quickly. And so you have to be also fairly nimble to change track and capitalize on any volatility we see in the market.
And if oil stays elevated, some are predicting $100 a barrel. Paint us a scenario for growth prospects for Asia and inflationary pressures and how that would work against it.
So the rule of thumb is that for every 10% increase in oil, inflation increases by about 0.3 to 0.4% with a 6-month lag. So it's just not the price of oil, it also depends the duration at which oil is at that level. We have a recent sort of episode which happened in 2022, where you saw a spike in oil prices after the Russia-Ukraine war, and you saw after that it was elevated for some point in time, and you had an inflation spike. I think if this conflict lasts for 3 to 4 months, you will start to see inflation spike up in not only in Asia but also in the US, and that would then mean the expected interest rate cuts would sort of would not happen as the market is expecting currently. And the second thing is we would see earnings fall globally, but Asia more so, by anywhere between 5 to 7%. That's again a rule of thumb for every $10 increase in oil price. The last thing I want to say here is that oil has already increased in the past month or so by about $20 or so. And so a lot of it is in the price. It only goes to $100 and beyond if there is critical damage to energy infrastructure in the region.
And US President Trump, he's also concerned about energy supply globally. He's promising that he will make safe passage for vessels through the Straits of Hormuz. How easy is that to actually do, simply because the oil prices actually don't reflect his reassurances?
Exactly. I think it's very difficult to implement. And, I mean, during normal times, I think there are hundreds of ships which pass. So it'll be very difficult to actually implement that. And also it's a cost of insurance. So if insurance costs go up, then tankers and VLCCs and the likes, they're more hesitant. So despite the announcement by Donald Trump, we see currently, from what I can see, there are no ships passing the Strait of Hormuz as we speak. So I think it's a positive sign that the U.S. government is saying that we've got your back, but in reality, it's so difficult to implement because there are like hundreds and thousands of ships which need to pass.
Uday, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate those insights. That was Uday Vikram, who is Co-Chief Investment Officer at Clay Singapore.
All right, so let's turn to the situation on the ground, and governments are racing to bring their citizens home amid widening instability across the Middle East. Hundreds are being moved out by land, with airspace closures disrupting flights, of course. Now, Japan says 2 of its citizens who evacuated Tehran by land have safely reached Azerbaijan. They are the second group of Japanese evacuees this week. 5 others earlier safely moved out of Israel.
政府としては引き続き現地の状況やまた邦人のニーズを踏まえつつ、万が一の事態に備えて国外退避の準備を含め邦人保護に万全を期してまいります。
South Korea evacuated about 140 of its citizens from Iran, Israel, and neighboring countries. More than 110 South Koreans left Jerusalem and Tel Aviv by land, crossing into Egypt before heading to Cairo. 24 others departed Tehran and entered Turkmenistan. Smaller groups moved out of Bahrain and Iraq, but some 40 still in Iran. China, well, it says it has evacuated more than 470 Chinese citizens since hostilities began. Beijing says it is highly concerned about the situation and has urged all sides to resume talks. Iran has sealed off a vital artery for global energy shipments. The Revolutionary Guard says it has complete control of the Strait of Hormuz, warning that it will attack any vessels passing through with missiles or drones. U.S. President Donald Trump had said that the U.S. Navy is prepared to escort oil tankers through the vital waterway, as we heard a bit earlier. Now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry is urging a halt to all military operations in the strait.
霍尔木兹海峡及其附近水域是重要的国际货物和能源贸易通道，维护这一地区的安全稳定符合国际社会的共同利益。中方敦促各方立即停止军事行动，避免紧张事态进一步升级，防止局势动荡对全球经济造成更大的影响。
Let's go straight to Dubai. Blake Sifton joining us for CNA Live from Dubai there. Blake, as the situation changes so quickly, what do we know about the latest broad-scale strikes that Israel has announced over Tehran?
Good afternoon. Well, that's right. The Israeli military says they are carrying out broad and wide-scale attacks targeting Tehran. They say this is the 10th wave of attacks they've carried out on the Iranian capital. They also say earlier today they struck Iranian targets in the cities of Shiraz and Isfahan. And they also claim to have shot down an Iranian jet, a Russian-made jet using an F-35, which would be the first time the advanced F-35 fighter jet has ever shot down a manned aircraft in combat. Now, meanwhile, Iran continues to fire on targets across the region. We saw earlier today the Qatari Ministry of Defense said that 2 ballistic missiles were fired at the country. One was intercepted. One landed at the El Udeid American Air Base there in Qatar, though no one was injured. Saudi Arabia also said they intercepted 10 drones and 2 cruise missiles in 3 separate incidents. And Kuwait said that an 11-year-old girl was killed when debris from an interception hit her on the ground. We've also, of course, seen now 3 Iranian attacks on U.S. diplomatic facilities using drones in Dubai, at a consulate in Kuwait, as well as in Saudi Arabia, with no one injured in any of those attacks.
We've been talking about the Strait of Hormuz with our business guest earlier. It's becoming a focal point. Who is in control of it, and what measures are being taken to secure this vital energy shipping way?
That's right. I mean, this has been expected for almost decades amongst tension with Iran. They've always threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz if it came to it. And now they say that they have closed it. The United States Central Command says that's not true. It says it's open. Reuters is reporting that a single ship may have successfully passed through, but it is fair to say the vast majority of ships are not crossing. Earlier today, there were reports of oil tankers attacked off the coast of Oman as well as off of Fujairah. That follows at least 3 other incidents in the last few days where oil tankers or other ships were targeted either by drones or aerial drones, missiles, or by unmanned sea drones, which either go above on the surface of the water or slightly below it and explode on impact. Now, of course, President Trump has said that the U.S. will escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. It's unclear how viable that will be. We need to remember that the IRGC Navy, for many, many years now, has been preparing for asymmetric warfare. They're not confronting the United States with large naval vessels. They have focused on small attack craft, on these unmanned sea drones, essentially suicide boats I mentioned, as well as anti-shipping missiles along the coast and drones. So it's unclear what ability the United States Navy would have to fully protect ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz. So that situation remains unclear at this stage and how viable that option will be.
In Dubai, Blake Sifton. Thanks, Blake. Coming up on East Asia tonight, what investors in China's economy will be looking out for as policymakers set new targets and strategies. Plus, what China could resort to as the war in Iran cuts off chunks of its oil and gas imports. China's most significant annual political event is underway in Beijing. The first of the 2 sessions opened this afternoon. It brings together China's top political advisory committee, known as the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC. The body has limited formal powers and includes representatives from various sectors of society, including business leaders. Xpeng CEO He Xiaoping and Xiaomi CEO Lei Jun are among this year's attendees. Attention will shift tomorrow to the more consequential National People's Congress, the party's legislature. It is closely watched because it sets policy direction at the start of the new planning cycle. The 15th five-year plan will chart China's strategy through 2030. Now, we will be joining our correspondents for more on this. Deborah Wong, Tan Yu Guan joining us later this hour. But before that, CNA's Roland Lim back to tell us what the investors will be looking out for. Roland.
Thanks, Jill. Yes, the real signal from the 2 sessions is whether Beijing is serious about boosting domestic demand, not just talking about it. Or will it stick with incremental moves while leaning on tech investments and industrial upgrading? Now, here are the key metrics investors will watch to price in growth, rates, and risk. On growth, markets expect a GDP target of around 4.5% to 5%, with private forecasters closer to 4.5%. Now, that gap matters. Near 5% tells markets that Beijing is willing to lean harder on stimulus and to avoid a visible slowdown. 4.5%, well, that signals we accept slower growth and usually more focus on risk control and structural goals over the short-term period. Now, on inflation, the CPI target is expected to stay around 2%. Now, that tells you what policymakers think healthy demand looks like. Actual inflation is still very weak. Now, January's CPI was up 0.2% year-on-year, and producer prices remain in deflation. So holding a 2% goal is effectively an admission that demand still needs to do more heavy lifting, and it leaves room for easier policy without fear of overheating. A third, jobs, the most politically sensitive metric. Now, job targets are the red line on any move to tighten policy. Now, markets expect the urban unemployment ceiling to stay around 5.5%. Now, if Beijing lowers that cap or raises job creation goals, especially for services and youth, it's signaling urgency. Now, if targets are left unchanged, it suggests policymakers see employment as stable enough for now. And finally, China's fiscal stance. Now, advisors want the budget deficit ratio kept around 4% of GDP or higher, but traders will focus more on bond issuances, both central and local. Now, bigger deficits and higher bond quotas means more infrastructure, more refinancing of stressed local government, as well as potentially more support for households. Now, smaller numbers mean Beijing is relying on targeted measures and expect the private sector to do more of the heavy lifting. So markets won't just be listening for targets, they'll be asking whether Beijing is really willing to pay for them. Now, oil prices up 3% as the US-Israeli war on Iran disrupted Middle East supplies. Brent crude is currently at $82.75 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate US marker is up 3.14%, $76.90. Brent prices have jumped more than 34% this year. Israeli and US forces struck targets across Iran yesterday, prompting Iranian strikes against energy infrastructure that accounts for just under a third of global oil production. That's despite President Donald Trump promising US military escorts to ensure safe passage for oil tankers and other vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. He also says the US will provide insurance guarantees in a very reasonable price to head off a potential energy crisis. But it did little to calm the markets as traders are skeptical that the escort plan will allow oil flows to return to normal. Now, China may be looking to Russia for its oil supplies as the unfolding crisis in the Middle East may cause Beijing to lose its supply of cheap Iranian oil. Now, China, the world's largest oil and gas importer, relies on Iran for 13% of its crude oil imports. Now, 1/3 of China's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and so does 25% of its gas imports. But shipments has all but halted. Analysts say that China would likely look into leaning on Russia to make up for the loss in oil supplies. Now, Russia already China's largest source of crude, accounting for 20% of imports. Now, China has bought years of copious amounts of Iranian crude. They also believe that Beijing may mull the use of oil reserves, with some Chinese refineries slowing down operating rates. Meanwhile, Chinese financial firms are reportedly pulling back from the Middle East as regional tensions escalate. Now, several Chinese banks and insurers are scaling down exposure as regulators, including Hong Kong's Monetary Authority, as well as China's National Financial Regulatory Administration, step up scrutiny. Now, one report says a major bank has restricted a loan drawdown to an Abu Dhabi government entity, while a mid-sized lender is seeking buyers to offload parts of a $4 billion syndicated loan linked to sovereign wealth fund ADQ. The pullback comes after Chinese lending in the region surged to a record $15.7 billion last year. And that is the latest in business. Jill, back to you.
Appreciate that so much, Roland. Thank you. Coming up on East Asia Tonight, our China correspondents join us to tell us what to look out for as the nation's most important annual two sessions meetings begin. And Beijing says it is willing to work with Washington ahead of a much-anticipated meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, but warns of red lines that must not be crossed. This is East Asia Tonight. We've got your headlines this hour. The US-Israel war on Iran triggering a free fall in Asian markets. Seoul bearing the brunt with a record-breaking crash that wiped out $500 billion in value. At the heart of the crisis, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran claims complete control, sealing off one of the world's most crucial energy shipping routes. But Donald Trump says the US Navy is ready to escort oil tankers through the waterway. China's top policymakers set to unveil new economic targets at the two sessions as investors look for signs that Beijing is serious about tackling key issues, including sluggish consumption and a rapidly shrinking population. On that topic, and joining us now for more, CNA correspondent Deborah Wong, who's in Beijing. Deborah, first of all, the two sessions taking place as the war, the US-Israeli strikes unfold in Iran. I'm wondering, how much will this geopolitical issue shape the discussions in Beijing this week?
So the two sessions may be largely a domestic affair, but discussions around China's economic game plan this week, as well as new laws, will no doubt shape how the country deals with external challenges like a global trade disruption, global tech race, as well as and the wars, the conflicts that you talked about. So there were questions raised during the press conference of the National People's Congress earlier about geopolitics, about China's foreign policy, especially how it deals with relationship with the US amid the conflicts in Iran as well as Venezuela, and how it views the collapse of the global governance system as well as the role of the United Nations. Have a listen to what the spokesperson said.
中方一贯认为，大小国家相互尊重、一律平等是历史进步的要求，已是联合国宪章首要原则。任何国家都没有控制国际事务、主宰他国命运、垄断发展优势的权利，更不能在世界上我行我素。
So this conflict adds another layer of complication to the China-US relationship, especially as we are expecting US President Donald Trump to visit Beijing at the end of the month, because in just a matter of months, the US had launched military operations on Venezuela, on Iran, two of China's valued trade partners. You know, China has extensive investments in oil, infrastructure, logistics, and in other various sectors as well in these two countries. Aside from that, the press conference also addressed the issue of neighborhood diplomacy, especially amid tensions with Japan over Taiwan. Now, China says while it's committed to maintain shared development and also protect regional peace, it says it will also be safeguarding its national sovereignty and national interest because Taiwan remains a red line.
Now, as China gets down to business, what economic priorities can we expect as China prepares to launch its 15th five-year plan?
So China says it's committed to maintain openness, and that is important amid rising protectionism as well as a global economic slowdown around the world. We do know that in recent bilateral meetings, in multilateral forums, China has committed, it has pledged to increase imports for trade. It wants to expand two-way investments as well as attract more foreign direct investments. It will be going big on science and tech, intensifying original innovation as well as scientific breakthroughs in core technologies. And it's also not just ramping up the domestic space, but it also wants to boost international collaboration in tech to achieve more shared development. But of course, a big portion of uplifting the economy really lies in raising a domestic consumption, and something that they've had difficulties with the last few years. Have a listen.
促进高质量就业，制定实施城乡居民征收计划，增强居民的消费能力，稳步推进基本公共服务均等化，完善教育、托育、养老、医疗保障体系，减少居民消费的后顾之忧。
Now, next, we will be watching out for China's growth target too. Several analysts that we spoke to say they expect around 4.5 to 5% of a growth target. It's something that's a bit lower than the last 3 years of around 5%. And this is also because China is going to be bracing for sustained external challenges. So if that kind of growth target does materialize, it signals that China is going to be showing a higher tolerance for slow economic growth. At this point, I want to bring in my colleague here, Yu Guan, senior correspondent Tan Yu Guan, joining me here in Beijing. Yu Guan, you attended the opening session of the CPPCC, China's top political advisory body. What kind of notable takeaways did you listen to?
Well, the most notable takeaways, really, one of the most notable ones at least, was who wasn't present, right? Of course, we have those three generals who were removed from their seats just yesterday, right? And then today, there were also notable absentees among those on the stage. 2 Politburo members were missing. Reuters picked that out. Zhang Youxia and Ma Xingru. Their absence from the stage itself is not that notable, but Zhang was put under investigation since January. This indicates that the probe hasn't ended. Zhang is, of course, China's highest-ranking general and notably vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. Meanwhile, Ma has not been in public eye since late October. Ma was formerly the party's top official in Xinjiang. As for the opening itself, in typical two sessions fashion, it ran like a choreographed performance. Huang Huning, who is the chairman of the CPPCC, delivered the Standing Committee Work Report. The Shanghai-educated French-speaking top official is among the top 7 in the party leadership as part of the Politburo Standing Committee. He is the chief ideologue. His rise is rooted in policy, ideas, and ideology, rather than having run a province, ministry, or a city. Now, so in his work report, kind of reflects his background in a way. He portrayed 2025 as a pivotal year that is the end of the 14th five-year plan, and he highlighted that the CPPCC has held 98 consultative events and put up nearly 6,000 proposals, of which just over 5,000 were accepted. He also noted that the CPPCC played an advisory role in hammering out the 15th five-year plan, the current plan that is, of course, due to be considered and passed by the MPC this year.
Yuguan, thank you for that. But the CPPCC, you talked a lot about big names that we've heard all these generals and Wang Huning, who's also a very influential figure in China. But it doesn't have real legislative power, does it?
That is true, but between the CPPCC and the MPC, the CPPCC is really the one that is pretty unique in the Chinese system and the one with the real expertise, because that's the place where real ideas come from. The CPPCC has a much broader range of delegates. They include non-party members, business leaders, academics, ethnic minorities, and religious figures. You can see that diversity in the reception hall. I spotted a pastor with a white clerical collar, an abbot with Buddhist robes, and of course, delegates in ethnic minority costume. They always attract a lot of that attention. Now, this broad representation can sometimes mean that these delegates can exercise meaningful influence through their background. Take Lei Jun, the head honcho, or Xiaomi, for example. The CPPCC delegate has gone public with his suggestions, and his suggestions include ways to accelerate the application of general-purpose humanoid robots in intelligent manufacturing, and also to build a traffic safety system for the era of intelligent vehicles, presumably self-driving cars. By law, the government departments need to respond to proposals by CPPCC members, but they're not obliged to implement them. But I dare say his words carry weight, and given his area of expertise, will provide valuable feedback to the leadership.
All right, thank you so much, Yu Guan, for that insight. Now, the National People's Congress will convene on Thursday, where Premier Li Qiang will be delivering the government work report. Now, delegates after that will spend the next few days reviewing the 15 five-year plan proposals. And we'll be here in Beijing to bring you the latest. Jill.
All right, thank you so much. Our CNA correspondent Deborah Wong there, as well as senior correspondent Tan Yuguan, live from Beijing, and setting us up very nicely for the National People's Congress. Now, ahead of that, China's legislature spokesperson says Beijing is willing to work with Washington, but says there are red lines that must not be crossed.
中方愿同美方一道，加强国层级、各渠道的沟通。 为双方合作开辟更广阔的空间，同时，中方已有自己的原则和底线，将一如既往坚决捍卫自身主权、安全、发展利益。
The political gatherings are taking place at a sensitive moment for US-China relations. Ties have been strained due to Donald Trump's tariff war and are further complicated by US military strikes on Venezuela and Iran, key suppliers of oil to China. The US president is due to visit President Xi in Beijing at the end of this month. Their top trade negotiators are reportedly meeting in Paris next week, but discussions are said to be focused on business deals and kept separate from geopolitical matters. Still to come on East Asia tonight, Nepal heads to the polls tomorrow, one that may have implications for the rivalry between neighbors China and India. And Taiwan charges dozens of people with suspected links to an alleged cyber scam kingpin. As energy fears from the turmoil in the Middle East roil Asian stocks, analysts say U.S. President Donald Trump's suggestion to escort commercial vessels through the Hormuz Strait is aimed at stabilizing markets. It would not be the first time Washington has taken such a step. CNA's Sarah Al-Khaldi explains.
The war between Iraq and Iran in the late 1980s also spilled into the waters of the Persian Gulf. The critical waterway saw both sides attack commercial vessels as a way to target each other's war chest. As tankers' attack increased, Kuwait turned to the U.S. for assistance. Well, in response, the Reagan administration prepared the largest naval convoy operation since World War II and launched Operation Earnest Will, where U.S. Navy warships escorted Kuwaiti-owned tankers through the Strait of Hormuz and protected them from Iranian attacks between 1987 and 1988. And that underscores how the narrow waterway connecting Middle East's oil-rich states to the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean is both a critical oil transit route and a potential flashpoint in regional conflicts. Maritime trade traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has ground to a near halt after tankers in the area were hit amid Iranian retaliation against U.S. and Israeli military strikes. Now, tracking by analytics agency Kepler shows stranded ships in areas clustering around large ports on either side of the strait. The world's energy supply is tied tightly to this narrow passage. Kepler data shows roughly 13 million barrels of oil per day flowed through the Strait of Hormuz last year. The critical artery accounts for about 30% of global seaborne crude and 20% of global LNG trade. 90% of the oil leaving the strait is bound for Asian countries, according to Bloomberg estimates. So China, India, South Korea, and Japan are the top destinations, putting the region at most risk to supply shocks if the strait is closed.
A court in Japan has upheld an order to dissolve the Unification Church, found to have manipulated its followers into making huge donations. Now, the church will lose its status as a religious corporation with immediate effect. Authorities had accused the group of swindling about $130 million in donations from more than 1,500 people, the church calling the ruling unjust. Japan's chief cabinet secretary is hoping for a smooth liquidation process to make sure victims get compensated quickly. The church came under heavy scrutiny in 2022 after the fatal shooting of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. His killer, Tetsuya Yamagami, cited Mr. Abe's ties to the church, which bankrupted his family because of huge donations. An appeals court in South Korea has begun hearing the obstruction of justice trial of former President Yoon Suk-yeol. The 65-year-old was sentenced to 5 years in prison in January for obstructing attempts to detain him after he briefly imposed martial law in 2024. He was also convicted of violating the rights of cabinet members when he excluded them from a meeting to review his emergency law plan. The former leader faces 8 trials related to his martial law attempt, his wife's alleged corruption, and the death of a Marine in 2023. He was sentenced to life imprisonment last month for leading an insurrection. Now, prosecutors in Taiwan have indicted more than 60 people and 13 firms linked to the Prince Group, a multinational network accused of running a vast network of scam centers. Prince Group has denied any wrongdoing in November last year. The suspects have been charged with offenses which include initiating, directing, and manipulating a criminal organization. Other charges include large-scale money laundering and falsifying accounting records. As part of investigations, Taipei prosecutors have also seized more than $1.7 billion worth of assets, which include a slew of luxury cars. Prosecutors also accuse Prince Group members of exploiting Taiwanese nationals to carry out money laundering in the city through online gambling and underground remittances. They could face jail sentences of between 6 and 21 years. The indictment includes Prince Group's chairman, Chen Tse, who was arrested and deported back to China from Cambodia earlier this year. His whereabouts are currently unknown. Prosecutors allege the businessman used Taipei as a spot to funnel illicit funds via shell companies. He allegedly bought luxury goods, sports cars, and real estate there to conceal and disguise the source and flow of criminal proceedings. Nepal heads to the polls tomorrow, months after historic youth-led protests have forced the government to resign. The general election will pit the country's old guard against a new generation of leaders, promising to fix the country's decades-old corruption. Neha Punya is tracking that story and filed this report for CNA from Kathmandu.
Home to Mount Everest and 7 of the world's tallest peaks, Nepal is a country known for its serene beauty. But deadly youth-led protests last September plunged the country into political turmoil. Now millions of Nepali people are set to vote in the first election since. On the ballot, the very same issues that fueled the protests: high youth unemployment and endemic corruption. Issues that also helped force out KP Sharma Oli, the country's 4-time prime minister, paving the way for new faces and new voices to lead Nepal.
You look at the voters' mindset. They're not really going to vote for a whole political party. That's what it looks like as of now, And they basically, all of them are looking for a new candidates and new political parties because they really don't have a good experience of working with the whole political parties.
In the fray are 3 key figures: a former rapper who rose to prominence as Kathmandu's mayor, Balendra Shah. He's promised to create 1.2 million jobs and reduce forced migration. He's believed to be the front-runner in this election. Gagan Thapa, a young leader in Nepal's oldest political party, the Nepali Congress. He's promising to end corruption in 5 years and also promising to make his government fully accountable to the public. And finally, KP Sharma Oli, the former Prime Minister himself, hoping to make a comeback. It was his government's social media ban last year that snowballed into a revolt against Oli's government. The veteran communist leader says he offers experience and stability, but he faces allegations of overseeing a deadly crackdown on the same protests that ultimately forced him out of office.
For the last 35 years, Nepal's political sphere has been captured by few individuals and few political parties, and which was not really going well. So from these elections, people are hoping a lot of changes.
Many young Nepalis say they hope this election will bring stability, but trends suggest it may be another coalition government in a country that has had 15 prime ministers in the past 2 decades. Nepal also has a staggeringly high unemployment rate of just over 20%, and many youngsters say low wages are driving many out of the country. About 19 million of the country's 30 million citizens are eligible to cast their ballots on Thursday in what's widely being called a watershed moment for Nepal's politics. For CNA, I'm Neha Punya in Kathmandu.
Changing gears a bit, there's a new wave of new robotics and physical artificial intelligence on display at this year's Mobile World Congress. From augmented reality to drones, phones, and even forest fire detection methods, the Tech Summit showcases the latest in the fast-moving world of digital infrastructure and connected devices. Ross Cullen files this report for CNA from Barcelona.
Saying hello to the future. The AI in this robot is learning behaviours that could help humans. Picking up a box may be simple for us, but right now the robot requires 60 repetitions to understand the task. This screen is known as the window into its brain to see how the intelligence is being used. Frank Long from Cambridge Consultants says the AI and robotics sectors are rocketing ahead in development.
The rate of improvement is incredible and the rate of growth is even faster. I'm so optimistic for the future that it's in 25 years' time, who knows what this is going to look like. But right now, I think we're starting to bring the future to the world.
The world of robotics is a battle for advancements in intelligence, as firms also grapple with regulatory changes and turbulence in supply chains.
Alongside phones and robotics, wearable tech is also very popular at this year's conference. These are some smart glasses from Meta, and they provide a service that's very useful at an international summit: instantaneous translation. Hey Meta, summarize this menu in English.
Appetizers include ham croquettes, piccolo peppers, and Iberian ham with tomato bread.
New tech is also helping to solve bigger problems. Forest fires ravage many parts of the world each year. Anna Gonzalo at Orange explains how a drone-based system can detect fire risk conditions.
You can analyze the possible risk according to different parameters, such as the wind, the humidity of the area, using all these sources, all this information, all this data that has been provided and sent to the platform using 5G network.
Exciting advances in invisible tech are also creating a buzz here. Li-Fi, which stands for light fidelity, uses ultraviolet or infrared light rather than radio frequencies to transmit data. It can be installed via existing overhead lighting in households. No need to lay fibre optic cables. Mustafa Afghani is the co-founder of a company that develops Li-Fi.
You should expect much more consistent connectivity. So, those days of your video buffering or a web page stuttering should be gone.
The tech unveiled here at MWC has serious ambitions for robotics and AI to solve problems and save lives. But it's also fun. Whether it's the next automated Christmas present children will be asking for this year, showing how even the Mona Lisa can be moved to tears, or giving every tech firm a shot at finding a slam dunk fan favourite. For CNA, I'm Ross Cullen in Barcelona.
So the Lunar New Year has just begun, and while many in Japan visited temples to pray for good luck, others tried something more, not sure what the word is, frisky. Now, over the weekend, about 10,000 men wearing only loincloths gathered in Aichi Prefecture for the Konomiya Naked Festival. Yeah, you heard that right. Now, their goal? To touch one man who has been designated as a semi-deity known as the Shinotoko. They believe that touching the god-man will transfer their bad fortune to him. The tradition dates back more than 1,000 years to a purification rite said to have been performed by a regional governor. Organizers urged caution this year, though, after a similar festival in Okayama last month left 3 men unconscious after crowds fought over a sacred wooden stake. But it seems many still willing to push their luck.
初めてだったんですけど、本当にすごく独特なこの裸で男がしくらまんじゅうをして直い男をこう運んでいくっていうところが本当にすごい貴重な体験になりました。
一回こけたんですけど、もう死にかけました。
So many pressure in the middle with to touch the bald guy and so on. A lot of pressure and my feet also. Everyone is stepping in my feet. That was crazy, but it's okay.
I hope it worked, my friends. Well, that's it for Wednesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cne.asia, Facebook and also YouTube. Bye-bye.